Welcome back. As you may or may not know, I'm known as Eli, the computer guy, and my current project is something called SiliconDojo.com. Basically, it's a education platform where we have self-study classes for you. So we have classes on Python and SQL and the Bottle Web App Framework. I'm doing some classes on AI right now. You can just go and you can just simply learn any of these topics. We do Zoom classes generally every Friday. Plus, I do one-on-one sessions with my students where we talk about their particular issues in the technology world, getting ahead in their careers and that type of thing. I do that every Monday, 1 through 5 p.m. You can sign up for those at silicondojo.com. And I get questions, the same types of questions a lot. So I figured I'd do these types of videos to answer those questions for folks who don't necessarily have time to do one of the one-on-one sessions. Anyways, the question for today that I wanted to talk about is, can you trust Chinese AI? Chinese artificial intelligence? Or really, which one is better to trust? American artificial intelligence or Chinese artificial intelligence? The reason I think this is kind of an interesting question, especially from my students, is I have an international student base, and this actually came from somebody that's trying to create a platform in Morocco. So again, one of the things to be thinking about in the modern world when you think about media and you think about propaganda and all that type of stuff is what happens when you're consuming somebody else's propaganda. Right? You hear about that, right? You know, Russia and all these different people are doing misinformation and fake news and all that kind of stuff. And it's all towards like America. Well, what happens when you're in Morocco consuming content that was created for the United States that has propaganda and misinformation in it? It is kind of one of those weird things in the modern world to consider and to ponder. And so, anyways, there's this big thing that's been going along right now with this whole idea of artificial intelligence, and really that especially for Americans, that Americans should be scared of artificial intelligence. But here's the thing. What if you're not an American? What if you're not an American? It is curious talking with this person. And again, it's one of those things to consider if you're somebody that's outside of the United States, is basically being in Morocco. There's this software as a service platform that he really likes. So he's in the business world, whatever. Won't go into it too much. But anyways, he's in the business world. There is this one platform that is actually really good. The issue, and this is something to consider in the modern world, is that all the support is in English. So they're in Morocco. Not everybody there speaks English. All the technical support for this platform is in English, which is actually a rather practical problem for them. Not only that, being in Morocco, I guess how Arabs, he was saying how Arabs do business. A lot of times the business owners actually give credit to the customers. So you come in, instead of having a credit card, you don't necessarily have a credit card, but you come in and say, oh, I don't have enough money for this loaf of bread. And they say, okay, we'll put that loaf of bread on your account. That's not something we really do in the United States anymore. And so we were saying there are some of these business transactions, the way they do business there simply isn't built into the workflows by these American companies. So it's interesting. Like, he actually likes this particular software as a service product, but it doesn't fit the niche for how Morocco does business, their workflow support, those types of things. And so he's trying to build something that actually fits in to how they do business, which again is one of those things that I'd consider for a lot of you folks out there, especially if you're not in the United States. Again, one of the reasons why diversity is actually important is, right, I'm going to solve the problems that I see. And again, that's not being bigoted, and that's not being racist or any of that kind of stuff. Is just, again, as I say to you, right, as a technology professional, my job is to solve problems with technology. I'm going to go and I'm going to solve the problems that I see. I'm going to go solve the problems that my friends see. I'm going to go and solve the problems that my social group sees. I'm not going to solve the problems of Moroccans. I'm not anti-Moroccan. I'm not like, damn those Moroccans. I have no idea what the hell a problem Moroccan has. It just doesn't cross my mind, right? They're a couple thousand miles away. There's a lot of people between here and Morocco. I'm gonna solve a lot of those problems before I get to Morocco. So again, it's one of those things to consider when you think about where is your place in the modern world of technology. Is look around at the problems that are actually around you, and what you might find out is there's actually a rather large market simply because the people that are currently solving problems don't even think. You don't even come up in their mind. But anyways, we're going and we're sitting there and talking to this Moroccan guy. And we're sitting there and we're talking about this, and we're talking about APIs and infrastructure. It's actually nice. We're talking about tech stacks. You know, I like to talk about tech stacks. And then, of course, we get to AI, because we always got to get to AI. Anyways, so it starts talking about AI. So I start talking about some things. And he's like, yeah, well, one of the other considerations is I'm not sure who to trust. Do you go with American AI or do you go with Chinese AI, right? So DeepSeek is the big one. I think Alibaba now has models out. A lot of places in China now have models out. Plus you have all the American models. And again, it's an interesting thing to be thinking about. Like as a Moroccan, not as American, not as American, not as, quote unquote Western world, I would suppose, but somebody kind of outside of that. Do you trust China? Again, a more interesting question is, do you trust America? Which, just gets into the tedious modern world. But I do think this is something to kind of ponder and to be thinking about as you start to use these different products out there. Because my main argument is that you shouldn't trust any of these folks. Distrust, verify, stay suspicious. Like what's really weird, what I find very bizarre about the whole anti-China thing in the United States is that the politicians keep bringing out the boogeyman, right? The boogeyman. China might, right? There's this whole thing with the Chinese company owning TikTok. What might China do with that information? Here's the thing. We already know that the NSA, so Yahoo, back when Yahoo was actually popular, right? The NSA went in, and so there were two Yahoo data centers, right? And they were just synchronizing data back and forth the way they do. They were connected by a fiber optic line. NSA went in, spliced the fucking fiber optic line, put a man-in-the-middle device in there so that they could scan all the data that was getting synchronized between two Yahoo data centers. That, my friends, is real. Remember the time when the NSA was actually intercepting Cisco equipment in transit. Again, real. This is real. So basically, Cisco equipment was going from point A to point B, right? Going from the distributor to the final destination. NSA was actually intercepting this equipment in transit, opening the boxes, opening all the packaging, opening the equipment itself, putting in, devices for spying and all that kind of stuff into the actual hardware, sealed everything up so it looked all nice and perfect, and shipped it off to be put into God knows whose data centers. That is what our NSA has actually done. Our NSA and our intelligence agencies just gather a tremendous amount of information, and for some reason, nobody cares. Again, even with our publicly traded companies, again, if you look at companies such as Facebook, if you look at companies such as Google, they are collecting tremendous amounts of information about everybody. And apparently that's a-okay, right? Again, one of the interesting things with the whole anti-China thing, the anti-China jingoism in the United States, is we are not seeing new laws and regulations put in place to protect Americans or any other people's data and information that China is then violating. Like that could be a thing, right? That could be the trap. Right? We think China is violating these policies, so we're going to put in very strict regulations about how people's data is used, and then when we see them violate those brand new regulations, we'll beat the ever-loving snot out of them. But that's not what happens. Because they don't really care about privacy. They don't really care about protecting our information. What was it? The MIT review. Again, I can't even... I think it was like last November. They found that data aggregators, right? So these companies that go out and they aggregate data, collect information about you, again, who you are, your address, information, where you went to school, all of that kind of stuff. One of the things they found is MIT Review was able to go and use .asia addresses, email addresses. So basically, to show that they were coming from Asia, China, someplace like that, they would contact these data brokers and they were able to purchase data about our active duty service people and their family members for something on the order of 5 cents per record. This is true. .asia email addresses in bulk were able to purchase basically dossiers, portfolios of information about our active duty military personnel and their family members for, again, 5-10 cents per record. And I haven't heard the screaming about that. It's funny. It's funny if we're all worried about, protecting the American people and that type of thing. Where is the screaming about that? That doesn't seem to be occurring. And so one of the curious things to be thinking about, again, especially if you're not in the United States, when you hear the anti-China jingoism, one of the questions that you have to ask yourself, who's worse? Who's actually worse? Who is actually more dangerous to you? Is it more dangerous, the government that might do something, or is it more concerning, the actual country that does do something on a rather regular basis? And again, this is going to be one of those things that you need to consider. Now, to be clear, right? If you're in Hong Kong, might be a different story, right? Again, Chinese government seeing what you're doing with AI or whatever else might be a bit concerning. If you're in Taiwan, right, it might be a bit concerning. If you're in Vietnam, maybe Thailand, Southeast Asia, if China finds out, I don't know, you're trying to figure out how to make democracy better or something like that, that might be a concerning thing. But again, if you're halfway around the world, you're in some place like Morocco, there is an interesting question of, does it really matter to you in a pretty practical sense? That's one of the things I want you to be thinking about, again, as a student of Silicon Dojo, right? Again, there's jingoism, and there's morals, and there's ethics, right? There's AI and morals and ethics. We put all this stuff within quotation marks, right? Just words, or branded words, essentially. There's all that kind of stuff. Then there's the kind of brass tacks, but then there's a brass tacks. How does it actually and practically affect you? And other things you need to be thinking about, again, like with the United States, is things like the trade restrictions. So in Morocco, you're probably not going to get hit with trade restrictions. But one of the things I've discussed before, so with SiliconDojo.com, right? So we're free. We're free to the end user. If you want to consume our classes, you can consume our classes. If you want to do a one-on-one conversation with me, you can do a one-on-one conversation with me. Come to Zoom classes, all of that kind of stuff. There is no gatekeeper. There is no gatekeeper. There is no wall. And one of the reasons I didn't put a wall up is because, again, I know I have students from all over the world. And here's the thing. What if I charged $1? So I do these one-on-one meetings. Even somebody in India, they can pay $1. Anybody can pay $1. Everybody has $1, right? If they really want a meeting with me, they can pay something. But here's the interesting thing to think about. With how the United States is using our regulatory apparatus and our sanctioning regime, one of the interesting things is, if you are an 18-year-old in Iran, you can't pay me $1. You think about that? If you're an 18-year-old in Iran trying to figure out how to make your life better, right? You cannot pay me $1. PayPal will not accept your dollar. Stripe will not accept your dollar. And theoretically, even if you shipped it to me in the mail, I could not accept your dollar. Right? Because our government has decided that Iranian money is dirty, right? You can't get that. Again, one of the things I've talked about before with these GPUs is we're doing restrictions on sending GPUs. First, there are restrictions to China, then there's restrictions to the Middle East, then there's restrictions to South America, all because we're worried, China may advance further than us in the AI race, whatever, right? So all of a sudden, you put all these restrictions out there. So one of the things you need to consider, again, with your business, with your organization, like think about what your actual risk profile looks like. Is your risk profile really, like when you think about it, is there a real concern about, one nationality or another understanding how your particular customers use your product? Is that a real risk? Or is there a real risk of at any point in time, you may have integrated this product into your platform and all of a sudden you are no longer able to use it? Again, think about this with the whole idea with service-oriented architecture, SOA, is that we have all these different services, right? You have ChatGPT, you have Twilio, you have SendGrid, right? All these different services. And one of the concepts is if you want to migrate from one service to somebody else's service, you just change a few lines of code. Right? That's what we all say, right? We're initially building the platform, and we know in our heart of hearts at any time, if we want to go from this service to this service, we just change a few lines of code, no big deal. That's what you think when you're building it. But it's a year down the road, 2 years down the road, 5 years down the road. Everybody's been using this platform. The bugs have been worked out. The quirks have been worked out. All this crap has been worked out. Everything's flowing smoothly. And then all of a sudden, the next president of the United States decides you don't get access to our AI products. Or you don't get access to our financial systems. You can no longer use dollars to buy or whatever. And all of a sudden, right, your platform that you created that has this AI or whatever service component to it, that you've worked through all the bugs, you've worked through all the quirks, you figured out everything you need to do, that just simply stops working. Do you have risk tolerance for that? It's something to consider. Again, one of the things that I get very concerned about when we start looking at the United States and how we're trying to create this bipolar world, right? There's the Chinese pole and there's the American pole, right? That's a theoretical idea. One of the concerns that I have there is basically it's becoming more and more where we're saying if you play by our rules, that can change at any moment in time, you are allowed to get all of the things that we have, right? Where it seems like the Chinese poll is saying, we want to sell crap. You have one side saying, you get all of our fancy toys. If you play by our rules can change on a second by second basis. So you have to put that into your risk mitigation strategy, right? That's us. And then you have them, they're just like, we want to sell stuff. They start thinking about it. Again, from a risk manager's point of view, who do you want to buy products and services from? The people that will just sell you the product or service? Or the people that want you to jump through all these hoops to make sure that you're pure enough or whatever else? And so I think this is one of those things to really be considering as we move forward. And again, it's one of my big concerns as an American where we are breaking the world's inertia of using basically the American way of doing things. And you, as a technology professional outside of the United States, need to be thinking about what this new world looks like. Again, as an American, I'm sitting here right at this point in time. We have these tariffs going through, and so we have oh, Trump put tariffs on China, so they're now up to like 55%. So then China is now putting reciprocal tariffs back onto us. And so now Trump is threatening 50% more tariffs. So we might have 105% tariffs. We might have 105% tariffs from products coming in from China, right? And so that's, as an American, I have to think about that. Again, it changes business models. Do you buy new or do you repair? Like, I think about this with computer repair. So we have a viewer of the show or whatever. There's this guy, Martin Lehner, and he runs a managed service providing company up in Whitehorse, so up in the Yukon of Canada. And he still does, I think he still does, computer repair. So long after computer repair was a viable thing here in the United States, he was still doing computer repair up there. Again, has numerous employees, has a real MSP business up there. And one of his big profit centers is computer repair. And so I talked with him at one point, and again, it was like 2016. And I'm like, how the hell are you still making money off of computer repair? Again, swapping hard drives, RAM, that kind of thing. And he said it was because of shipping costs, right? So, literally, in order to ship a Dell computer from the United States to Whitehorse was something like over $200, right? Just the shipping cost. So, if it's like, okay, you have a $500 computer. So, that was the thing in the United States. Like, okay, do you repair the computer or do you just buy a brand new one for $500? Right? That's the thing. Well, there it was, do you repair the computer or do you buy a $500 computer that's going to cost you at least $700? And because of shipping and because apparently their logistic systems are not necessarily the best in Canada, it actually makes a lot more sense to do repair work. So again, still swapping hard drives and all that kind of stuff actually made sense in the Yukon long after, like a decade after it made sense here in the United States. And again, that's where we talk about why policies matter, why tariffs and why logistic systems, all this kind of stuff matters. Because it's not simply, does it make more sense to buy new or repair, is within the current macroeconomic environment, does it make more sense to buy new or repair? So again, here in the United States, it's going to be interesting if they really do jack up the tariffs to 105% on the stuff coming in from China. Again, does it make, are you going to be buying new things or are you going to be repairing stuff? Again, think about this if you have a car, right? So tariffs on the cars that are coming in now are at 25%. If it's going to cost you 5,000, so if you have like a Toyota Corolla that costs you $30,000, you think about buying a new Toyota Corolla. If the price of that Corolla goes up by $6,000 or more, simply by tax money, simply by taxes, are you going to keep the Corolla you have and simply repair it? Are you going to buy a new, right? Like this, it changes the business environment. And so that is the kind of thing that I have to think about, right? As an American, look, I have adequate audio. I'm not going to say it's good audio. Come on, it's me now. I'm never going to have good audio. I have adequate audio, right? I've been thinking, I don't know, my wife and I might become digital nomads again. We're thinking about the whole digital nomad thing. Again, another weird consequence of Trumpism is we might become digital nomads. True, true. We're looking at traveling around the country, staying at places for somewhere between 1 to 3 months, bouncing around, seeing how different places are. Anyways, sitting there and I was thinking about the whole digital nomad thing, and I was thinking about the whole audio quality thing, and then I saw the tariffs coming in again, 25, 50, God knows what the hell the tariffs are going to be at the end of the day, and I've been thinking about new audio, and then all of a sudden, it's like, look, I can buy a new audio system today at yesterday's prices, or I can wait till next week and buy an audio system at next week's prices. So I bought a new audio system. Again, like those are the kinds of little, like the little things to be thinking about at scale. Again, okay, so I did this. Okay. But think about all the people making these little decisions. Think about 330 million people as their decision tree changes ever so slightly or more than ever so slightly, and how does that affect everything going on? And the important thing is, right, that's how this affects me as an American and the things that I'm thinking about. But the thing that you have to consider, again, if you're not an American and you're in the outside world, right, is the ramifications of what's going on here and how this is changing systems, and where, how do you want to be building things going into the future? Again, when you build the platform, right, legacy systems were baby systems at some point. At one point, that server was new and shiny, and people were all excited about that god awful piece of crap you want to throw in the trash. Right? 10 years ago, people were like, oh my God, can you believe we got this beautiful thing? Right? Now it's a 10-year-old piece of crap that you really wish would die so you could buy something new. But it used to be a shiny new baby piece of technology. But the thing is with legacy, right? You buy that thing, you figure out the quirks of the thing, you smooth out all the edges of the thing, and then that thing just becomes part of your infrastructure, and then it just never goes away. It becomes legacy. And so one of the things to be considering for yourselves when you're building platforms, and again, you're thinking about things like artificial intelligence and putting that into your platform, what do you think you're going to be comfortable with being legacy in 10 years? Like right now, AI is new and shiny and fancy and sexy, and you just want to shove it in anything you can shove it into, right? But at some point, it's gonna be 10 years from now, and that shiny new thing is just gonna be an old piece of trash you really wish would have died a couple of years ago, right? And what you have to be thinking about is what what system do you want to buy now that will become legacy, that you think you'll be comfortable with as a legacy system, again, going into the 2030s? How does that paradigm look to you? And that's going to be one of the big things to be considering with the artificial intelligence or any of the services that come down the pike. Again, one of the interesting things that kind of gets overlooked is, again, service-oriented architecture. This is not a patentable concept. It's not like America owns the concept, right? You know, you hear about Twilio, or you hear about SendGrid, or you hear about these other things, or OpenAI's API or whatever, and it becomes very normal just to think about like, oh yeah, the American services. But there's no reason China can't have their own services. Why can't they have their own version of Twilio? Why can't they have their own version of SendGrid? Again, they're having their own GPS system. Again, it's an interesting thing, right? They're putting up their own GPS system. They're putting up their own low Earth orbit satellite internet system right now. They're building out their own technology infrastructure, and they're building it out at a scale that can be used for global consumption. And one of the things you need to be thinking about, again, as you build out your system, again, if you need SMS, API, SMS messaging services, do you as a non-American feel comfortable with Twilio, or does another country's, SMS API services make more sense? This is one of those things to really be considering. When you look at it again from the AI standpoint, one of the things that becomes interesting, again, you as a business person, right? Capitalism, right? One of the questions to ask is, do you want to pay American prices, or does it make more sense to essentially have China subsidize your service fees? Like, that's an interesting thing going on right now. Like, if you look at DeepSeek, right? So DeepSeek came out and they hit a whole bunch of benchmarks. Now, to be clear, I look at these benchmarks every once in a while. I can't make heads or tails of these damn things. Oh my God. It's almost like Linus. You ever watch Linus Tech Tips? And he tries to do like reviews over computers. And like this computer gets like 96 and a half frames per second with ray tracing. And this one gets, 105 frames per second without ray tracing. And you kind of just sit there again for somebody like me. You're like, I don't understand the difference. Right? Again, a lot of these AI tests that they put out there, the AI benchmarks that they put out there. I mean, again, they keep putting out more and more benchmarks. Gemini wins one day, OpenAI wins the next, Claude wins the next, DeepSeek wins the next. Like they're all just doesn't really matter. And one of the things is it's interesting is again with the United States, there's this whole propaganda movement that we have to be the front runners in artificial intelligence, right? So there is a line of crap that states that artificial intelligence is as dangerous as nuclear weapons. Again, this is marketing horse crap that just being put out there so investors will pump more money into this garbage. But anyways, right, there's that thing. And so since it's the most dangerous thing out there, again, whether it's the Biden administration, whether it's the Trump administration, there's this push that America has to be first. Well, the issue is we keep saying America has to be first as far as artificial intelligence is concerned. At the exact same time, we're insulting the ever-loving hell out of China. Again, we have something called the Pacific Pivot, where we pivoted our entire military apparatus to point at China. Again, trade agreement. Again, the anti-Chinaism is absolutely ridiculous, right? So China has a vested interest in embarrassing the United States. Again, this is one thing to be thinking about when you start thinking about geopolitics and nation states is you don't really want to get to the point where your quote unquote adversary has a vested interest in making you look like an idiot. You want to keep the animosity kind of like in the world of sanity of we're going to do tariffs and then your people are going to be pissed off, so then try to change trade policy or whatever. One of the problems you can get into is just what happens if the citizens of the other side just really start to hate you. They really start to hate you. What happens when the citizens on the other side are willing to go to bed hungry at night just, on the off chance that they'll be able to do something to piss you off? Right, that gets to be a bad time. And so one of the curious things now, again, with this whole push for artificial intelligence with the United States and trying to kneecap China with artificial intelligence, is China has a vested interest to basically try to embarrass the United States. And that's where you look, where DeepSeek comes out. And again, whatever the price points are now, but the idea was DeepSeek came out and it was something like their tokens cost 10 times less than OpenAI's tokens. All right, so you go and you use OpenAI, it's going to cost you, let's say, 1 cent per thousand tokens. It wasn't that, it was less than that. 1 cent per thousand tokens. And so DeepSeek comes out and says it'll cost you 0.1 cent per thousand tokens. And one of the things there is with China basically saying, look, we're not going to stop. And not only are we not going to stop, but we are going to start pushing our technology out to the rest of the world. Again, with the whole, it's almost that Silicon Valley thing of dump a lot of investment money into a company or product in order to take a monopoly position, and then you own that industry. Again, that doesn't actually work out as well as people think it does. But again, if you're a nation state and you got trillions of dollars in your bank account, why the hell not, right? And so an interesting thing to be thinking about there, again, you're in Morocco. You're not American, nor are you Chinese. You're Moroccan. So if you're sitting there and you're thinking, look, from a geopolitical, from a nation state standpoint, both these countries are assholes. Both these countries are selfish pieces of shit. Let's just be honest, right? So again, which one do you trust? Neither. Neither is the answer. And then you have this country over here, and then for some reason, who really cares why, their services cost 10 times less than the other person's services. You're just simply trying to run a business. Whose services should you use? Again, and also think about that. one person services, right? You may lose access to those services at a whim, not because anything that you did, not because anything even your country did, not even like if your president gets up and does something stupid. You could be doing the exact same thing, your country could be doing the exact same thing they've been doing for the past decade, and all of a sudden they lose access to services simply because somebody in that country is having a hissy fit, right? So these people, you're most likely going to keep access to services. The cost for those services is going to be 10x less, and both of them are assholes. Whose services are you gonna use? I know whose services I would use if I was Moroccan. I'm not Moroccan, so I'll use OpenAI. Sir, I will use OpenAI, sir, because I'm a good American. I'm just saying if I wasn't a good American, I don't know, DeepSeek doesn't look too bad, right? These are the things to consider. And then the next thing that you need to consider, again, is that whole question of security. And the bigger thing you need to think about when you think about security, again, when you think about US versus China, US versus France, France versus Indonesia, I don't know. Can you trust any of these people? Again, that's my argument, is you can't trust any of these people. None. Don't trust them, don't trust us. So one of the things you need to be thinking about is when you design your architecture, when you design your systems, how can you mitigate the risk of using APIs and other people's services? So one of the big things that I see right now with a lot of people using AI for their systems is they're just completely going whole hog in AI, especially as the cost of tokens go down. The idea is essentially let AI do it. Again, why should I bother to learn how to do program in Python and learn how to parse some information when I can just have AI do everything that I need it to do, especially as these context windows get bigger and bigger and bigger. One of the things to consider for yourself is basically how can you limit the amount of information that's going to any API. So instead of one of the things now is instead of sending an entire CSV file, because that's what you can do, you can send an entire CSV file and then you can ask questions about that entire CSV file. Well, here's the thing, whether that CSV file goes to China, whether it goes to United States, you are giving somebody else your entire CSV file. Does that sound like a smart idea? And so one of the things you can do is basically it's called pre-processing, right? Before you send the information off to any AI, try to clean up that information a little bit and try to limit the amount of information that's actually being sent out. So let's say you have, again, you have name, you have age, you have gender, you have social security number, you have shirt size, you have some other stuff, right? So let's say you're trying to figure out how many shirts you need to buy, right? You want to use AI because you can't be bothered to learn how to use SQL. And so you're like, oh, I need to know how many shirts. I need to know how many girl shirts, of what sizes, and all this kind of stuff. So it's like, okay, I'm going to send the entire CSV file off to AI. But again, if you do that, and it has social security numbers, and it has phone numbers, and it has people's addresses, and it has all this other stuff, does that make sense? Basically, all AI needs is it needs an identifier for the user. It needs the age or the size, I suppose, and the gender. That's the information that it actually needs. So one of the things to be thinking about is when you start using the AI systems, how can you strip out the information that the AI does not need so that you don't leak that information regardless? Right? That's a big thing to consider. One of the other things to consider too is how can you obfuscate the information that's being sent out, especially if you're trying to figure out, statistical correlations between things. Can you change the names of the things before they get sent out? Can you change, again, basically do very limited cryptography, not really cryptography. Again, it's called obfuscating. It's not really encrypting information. It's just kind of making it very confusing to understand. So let's say you're trying to do analysis of houses, right? So you got a database of all this housing information. here's the address of the place, and here's the whatever the place, and here's the price of the places, and all that kind of stuff. Let's say you got the CSV file, got 100,000 records in it, so you want to send it off to somebody's AI and to pull specific information out, see if there's any correlations. Again, one of the things you can think about there is if you send that out, that there may be value in that to somebody else. So what if you obfuscate it? So instead of being houses, you tell the AI it's cats. So instead of being a real estate company, you're now a pet company. You're like, but that doesn't make sense, Eli, because if these are cats and the price of a cat is $300,000, that's gonna seem weird. AI will obviously know there's something weird going on there. But again, what if you just change the price point? What if you just simply divide the $300,000 by 100,000? So now this cat is worth 30 bucks, and this cat is worth $35, and this cat is worth $55. And last month, this cat was worth $50. Right? Can you obfuscate the information that's going to the APIs so that it seems relatively normal on the outside, but you're not literally handing over your information to them so it can go into the training models or whatever else? Again, if you obfuscate, again, real estate to turn it into a pet company, then their models are learning about the values of cats and not the values of houses in, I don't know, Austin or something like that. I think these are some of the things to be considering when you use any of these systems. Again, think about using caching systems. So caching systems is where you have a local database or you have a database between you and the AI. So you have the request, and then you have the response back from the AI. So basically, what you can do is you can save the request. So you can save the request and you can save the response in your database. The next time somebody makes the same request, instead of going to the AI, you can simply pull the response from what's already in your database, right? That's something you can do, again, to try to limit how often you access these APIs. Other things you can think about is how do you build systems, maybe use local AI and an AI API system. So there's something called OLLAMA, OLLAMA. It's an AI framework. There's a lot of different ways you can run LLMs or whatever. There's a lot of ways to run these models locally. OLLAMA is probably one of the easiest ways to do it. So one of the things that you could do is whenever the user makes a request in your platform, you could initially send it to OLLAMA, get a response back from OLLAMA. The user could look at that response, and basically, you can simply ask the user, does this answer your question appropriately, or do you need a better answer? Right? So that keeps it all local. So it may be 50% of the time, or maybe more, OLLAMA is able to handle all the problems you got. But then every once in a while, again, it's a little bit more complicated, so you need that really fancy, again, DeepSeek or OpenAI model. And so when that happens, basically you can just click, nope, I need a more thorough response, and then that can go off to the AI API. That's now dropped your API calls in half, which again, it reduces your risk, right? The level of risk that you're dealing with when you start thinking about things like, again, people spying on you or collecting information or that kind of stuff. So anyways, those are some thoughts. Those are some thoughts to think about with should you use American AI or should you use Chinaman AI? Again, as an American, as an American, I know what I'd say. Probably use DeepSeek. Probably use DeepSeek. That's the worst part with what's going on in the world right now. Is when you're like, as an American, yeah, I'd pick theirs. God damn it. Oh, but I don't know. I'm just here to give you some honest thoughts about all this kind of stuff. But again, it's an important thing to be considering. Again, as you start building out your systems, right? Because like a lot of people, like, I've talked about politics, or I talk about people, I've talked about all this kind of stuff for a long time. And a lot of people say, Eli, why do you talk about this stuff? Eli, I'm here for the technology, not for this stuff. And again, I'm trying to limit it now because again, I don't know what to say about it anymore. But the important thing to understand with a lot of this is that your systems are designed based off of macro forces. Again, and sometimes those macro forces are the cost of hardware, just the functional cost of hardware, right? Sometimes those macro forces are off of tax policy. Again, you buy $100,000 worth of servers and a server rack, and you're actually going to get taxed. If you're a corporation, you get taxed on those fixed assets that you own, right? That changes. Do you do Office 365 where you get to deduct every dime when you spend it, or do you buy a rack of servers and you have a depreciation schedule and then you get taxed on it? Right? Those are kinds of things to think about. Again, when you're going to be building out things like data centers. Again, I would argue from a technology standpoint that most companies would probably do best with finding wherever in the world has incredibly cheap electricity, has relatively inexpensive land, and has a crap ton of fiber optic lines going through it. Right? There's hubs in the world that simply have a lot of fiber lines going through. Like Northern Virginia has a huge number of data centers. Right? So one of the arguments that I'd make, like in the modern world where fiber spans the world, where latency is less than 20 milliseconds for most things, right? I'd argue for a lot of companies, the best idea is just build a big ass data center one place and then maybe replicate that to another place in case there is a hurricane or something like that. But again, one or two data centers probably makes a lot of sense. But but again, that's from a technology standpoint. Again, low latency, fiber everywhere, blah blah blah. But again, with the new data localization laws that are going through with a lot of countries, again, especially in Europe, where if you have information about a European like a French citizen or a German citizen, if you have information that now needs to be stored inside the country. So I'm no longer building a data center inside France because, from a technical standpoint, it makes a damn bit of sense. I'm building a data center inside France because legally I have to build a data center inside France, right? How you share data, how data goes back and forth, all of that kind of. So again, like think about this, like with how you're going to design artificial intelligence, right? So Europe, right? There's a lot of protection over European data law now, right? European data isn't supposed to get shipped to the United States for a lot of things. So again, if I was in Facebook, or if I was in a global technology company, what I would want to do is I'd want to come up with this massive AI infrastructure, probably plop it down in St. Louis or something like that, and then basically have that AI infrastructure basically go through all of the data centers all over the world and try to collect information to bring it back. Right? I'm going to go out, I'm going to collect information here, I'm going to collect information here, right? That's probably how I would build it. And I would cache the information. Have the AI go find interesting information in the French data center, pull that information to create a local copy in the St. Louis data center, and then you can start trying to figure things out. But here's the interesting thing, right? Again, if French citizens' personal information are not supposed to leave France, literally how you then design the AI system will change. So then you need to design local AI systems. So you're going to have the French data center. The French data center will have some kind of artificial intelligence system in there to try to pull out valuable information. But then on top of that, once it does pull out the valuable information, the information it sends back to the United States can't be personally identifiable. So then you need to figure out how to obfuscate it. And then the interesting question then becomes like what happens when the AI no longer has access to the actual data, has to have access to the obfuscated data. So the AI in the French data center has to obfuscate the data that it's going to send to the United States. And the one in the German will obfuscate, and the one in the Thai will obfuscate, and the one in the Canadian will obfuscate. And so then you've got this main AI in the United States, and now it's got to suss out valuable information from data that you've purposely obfuscated, right? That's why politics and regulation and trade policy and tariffs and all that kind of stuff matter as a technology profession. Again, like I said, with the tariffs right now, right? We got a tariff, 25% tariffs on steel. Again, we might be getting 105% tariffs on anything coming in from China. Again, 20% tariffs or whatever from anything coming in from Taiwan right now. So if I'm going to build a data center as a good American, as a patriotic, red, white, and blue American, man, if I'm going to build a data center in 2025, I think I might look at Costa Rica. Like, what? On me. Again, maybe the most American thing you can do is build a data center in Costa Rica. So anywho, some things to think about, some things to consider. But yeah, this whole, the United States versus China AI race, if you're not American, right? I don't know. Do your own research, figure out who you trust more. And not just who you trust more today, but who you think you're going to trust more within the next 2 years, what your risk management is going to be. Your risk threshold, I suppose. And then also realize too, like with the United States, and again, why I call it propaganda and why I get frustrated with just the racist garbage, is again, we still have TikTok. So Trump, during the last months of his first presidency, tried to put through an executive order to get rid of TikTok because it was a national security threat. Again, I argued about it back then that you should not be able to use an executive order to do this type of thing. But anyways, right, that was over 4 years. That was 4.5 years ago, right? So anyways, that dies. We then get the Biden administration comes in, and then they try to outlaw, TikTok, the official, with the legal way of doing it. So it goes through Congress, and Congress agrees that TikTok is a national security threat. So it has to either be sold off or it has to be shut down. And then that's supposed to happen right before Trump gets into office. And so you would think. So Trump tried to kill TikTok during his first time in office. That failed. Now everybody agrees that TikTok needs to die. He's about to come into office, so you'd think that would be a slam dunk for Trump. Obviously, TikTok's going to go away. And yeah, no, TikTok didn't go away. And then they were given more time to be in the United States. And so now again, so he came in January 20th. I'm doing this in April, so January, February, March, right? So we're looking at like 2.5 months since he got into office. We still have TikTok. TikTok is given another 75-day reprieve. And again, here's just what I want you to understand. We were specifically told by all the people in power that TikTok is a national security threat, that it was a real and actual national security threat that puts Americans in danger. And, 4.5 years later, it's still doing whatever it's doing. So if that is not the reality of, again, the insanity of our anti-China policies, I don't know what is. So there you go. Some things to ponder, some things to think about. Again, if I was not in the United States, what I would really be thinking about right now is how how can you create non-aligned infrastructure? Right, think about this during the Cold War, right? So you had the United States and you had the USSR. So you had the people on our side, you had the people on their side. And there's this whole group of countries, there's this whole group of non-aligned countries where they're like, we don't want any part of your crap. Right? You know, they were too far away from the USSR to really be scared of the USSR. Like USSR wasn't going down to like South America or whatever. They didn't particularly like the United States either. Right? And so again, it was like the non-aligned countries. They're like, look, we don't want to deal with any of you. We have our own problems, right? We want our people to be fed. We want to figure out how to create, better systems for our people. We don't want to get dragged into this asinine Cold War. I think an interesting thing to consider for the non-Americans and for the non-Chinese folks is non-aligned infrastructure. Again, I talk about this with Zig Ziglar. There's a guy, Zig Ziglar, who says, you sell the sizzle, not the steak. Right? And the idea is like with marketing, with advertising, that you're selling the ambiance, you're selling the feel, you're selling the story of the item. You're not selling the item itself. And something to consider in the technology world, right? So much of this stuff has become commoditized. Again, any of these services, whether it's web hosting, whether it's email services, again, whether it's AI services or Twilio, all this kind of stuff is so commoditized at this point. And so there's a real question about what's the sizzle? What's the sizzle you can put on your email service, or your SMS service, or your whatever, to make it differentiated from all these others out there? Again, why wouldn't you just go with Google? Why wouldn't you just go with Microsoft services or whatever? And an interesting thing, like what if part of the brand that you created was unaligned? Technology for the people trying to build crap and don't give a fuck about US and China, right? Again, we building infrastructure-based companies that their culture is to be unaligned. I don't know. I think it's an interesting idea. It is something to ponder, something for somebody else to ponder. Don't look at me. I've got Silicon Dojo. Silicon Dojo is a big enough pain in the ass for me to deal with. So anyways, there you go. There is some pondering on China versus American AI and other things to be considering in this rapidly edifying world. The world is just becoming stupider by the day. There's not a hell of a lot I can do about it. Oh well. Anywho, with that, I actually have to create some classes for Moon Dream AI. So that's one of the self-study programs that we have at Silicon Dojo. Something called Moon Dream AI. It's local computer vision, artificial intelligence. So I'm going to finish up that series, and then we'll go on to the next one. And I've actually got that work to do today. So with that, see y'all later.